right now. If we've got Andrew on the line.
Hi, Congresswoman Bachmann.
Hey, thanks, Andrew, so much for joining us. I know that recently you were on Fox TV News with Judge Jean, and I'm so glad that you're here with us this afternoon. You wrote a fabulous blog post that I know that you and I agree on this issue completely. The global jihadist movement is real. The global jihadist movement is here in the United States. And it seems over and over and over again when we have a horrific incident, whether it is bringing about mayhem or whether it's bringing about maiming or whether it's bringing about murder, as we saw this assassination a week ago Saturday, the one thing that doesn't seem to get talked about very much is the motivation of the individual involved. And what we're seeing here is it isn't just because he's a Muslim, but the fact is he is a Muslim. He also has jihadist violence that he has targeted against Western institutions of authority, as you wrote in your blog, notably the police. Would you tell us a little bit more about what you wrote in your blog post? I think this is very enlightening, and I hope everyone is paying attention. Again, I'm Congressman Michele Bachmann, joined by Dr. Andrew Bostom. Please pay attention to what Dr. Bostom is going to talk about in the background of this individual.
Well, yes, I don't want to dismiss, as you pointed out and as my blog pointed out, that this man had serious psychosocial problems. But if we look at the larger milieu, just over the last few months, we have to place it in this context, and I would just ask people to consider this, that ISIS issued a fatwa. One of its major spokespersons, al-Adnani, issued a fatwa on September 22nd, which was, I think, pretty well publicized, and people understood that he was encouraging Muslims living within Western societies to attack various institutions, to attack the general public. But he really singled out attacking the police. And one day later, an Afghan Muslim immigrant on September 23rd in far-flung Melbourne attempted to kill two policemen and was shot dead. Now, on his body so he attempted to stab them to death with a dagger. On his body was found a larger knife, a large ISIS flag, and the police investigation in Australia determined that he had planned to behead the policeman who he had hoped to kill and then make videos of himself displaying, in gruesome ISIS fashion, the decapitated heads, the ISIS flag, etc. A month after that, in New York, in Queens, actually, not far from where I grew up, another Muslim attempted to kill policemen and grievously wounded an officer, Healy, with an axe blow to the head. And again, if you examined his social media, you saw clear-cut evidence of jihadist sympathies and wanting to act upon these kinds of ideas promulgated by ISIS.
So
and then on the same day...
So, Dr. Bostom, if I can just interject. Again, this is Congresswoman Michele Bachmann, joined by Dr. Andrew Bostom today on am970, The Answer. Again, this was 3 months ago. 3 short months ago.
That's
this
right.
Pronouncement came from the global jihadist movement. Again, September 22nd, so 3 months ago. And in that time, we have seen, you just recounted at least 3 examples. This is called a fatwa, a pronouncement, calling for killing innocents, in particular the police. And we saw the example in Australia. We saw the example in New York City with the hatchet murder. We've seen it now just a little bit over a week ago. And yet we are not seeing pounded night after night on the media the fundamental motivation, which we can tie back to whether it's their Facebook page, their tweets, what they've said, what's on their websites. Over and over, these guys are proudly declaring that their motivation stems from the global jihadist movement, and somehow we're disbelieving what's right in front of our eyes.
And I would say there was the same day that Brinsley made his attack, There was a Burundian Muslim convert to Islam who attacked and was shot dead, attacked police in France the very same day. But when we start examining Brinsley's social media accounts, it's quite alarming. He posted specifically, out of the thousands of verses in the Quran, he posted specifically Quran 860, which is a call for instilling jihad terror in the infidel as a means of submitting them to Islam. This is part of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. In their pronouncements, it is part of the Iranian constitution. It is part of a Pakistani jihadist war manual produced by the Pakistani army. And in fact, Michelle, we have to admit that this is a pronouncement made by Islam's prophet Muhammad. He talks about having become victorious through terror cast in the hearts of the enemy, where he too is referring to this specific verse. So you have to be completely delusional not to consider this in weighing what were the motivations of people like Brinsley. Moreover, he had a video on in his social media postings about him approaching a mosque, which is it doesn't actually show him going in, so it needs to be further investigated. But approaching a mosque in Brooklyn, which is a hotbed by New York City's own investigations, NYPD, the city of New York, a hotbed of jihadist activity, funding, even going so far as to train mosque attendees how to disarm the police and engage in paintball games where they become jihad assassins.
Okay,
This is the mosque on his Facebook page.
Dr. Bostrom, I think that's an extremely important point. I wanted to give you the time to make the case that you just made. Again, if you're joining us late, again, bring your pink slip. Don't ever let that happen again, because you can't believe what you miss on this show if you come in late. My name is Congresswoman Michele Bachmann. I'm a member of the House Intelligence Committee. We deal with the classified secrets of the nation. Most particular, we focus on terrorism. This is something that we saw, that we have watched. We deal with the fatwas. We deal with this reality of what's going on. And one thing that is, I think, extremely troubling to me is to see the extent that our own United States government is making to stretch dealing with law enforcement and national security into the realm of political correctness. One thing that has me concerned is the idea that the FBI no longer is going into mosques performing surveillance anymore, especially in light of fatwas. When we come back after the break, you won't want to miss this. Dr. Bostrom has kindly agreed to give us a little bit more of his time in the next segment. I want to read to you specifically from this fatwa and hear more of the thoughts of Dr. Andrew Bostrom. Again, I'm Congresswoman Michele Bachmann. Stay with us for an exciting rest of this hour. All we do here at AM 970, The Answer. If you're joining me, I am Congresswoman Michele Bachmann. Thank you so much for being with us today. I have the privilege of sitting in for the legendary John Gambling. We've been talking today about the influence of the global jihadist movement, even here in the United States. Joining me today is Dr. Andrew Bostrom. We've had a great time with Dr. Bostrom. I've known him for a number of years. He is well-versed in the subject matter. I also am a member of the Intelligence Committee in the House of Representatives. We deal with the classified secrets of the nation, and most specifically focusing on terrorism. I'm very, very excited to be able to have Dr. Bostrom on today. I'm very excited about what he has to say. In the run-up to the tragedy that occurred just over a week ago in Brooklyn, with the assassination of the two heroic police officers. We know that in the run-up to that, within the last 3 months, there was a fatwa that was issued by an imam that called for murdering innocents across the United States and across the world who are not a part of the Islamic movement. I want to read to you specifically what this broad license was given for these murderous assaults on Western disbelievers. This is the actual quote of the directive to commit these murders. This is how I want Dr. Bostrom to link up what happened just over a week ago with these two heroic officers. quote, if you can kill a disbelieving American or European, especially the spiteful and filthy French, or an Australian or Canadian or any other disbeliever from the disbelievers waging war, including the citizens of the countries that entered into a coalition against the Islamic State, then rely upon Allah and kill him in any manner or way, however it may be. Do not ask for anyone's advice. Do not seek anyone's verdict. Kill the disbeliever, whether he is civilian or military, for they have the same ruling. Both of them are disbelievers. Both of them are considered to be waging war. The civilian by belonging to a state waging war against the Muslims. Both of their blood and wealth is legal for you to destroy, for blood does not become legal or legal to spill by the clothes being worn. But there's a very special priority for law enforcement. And so this is what it said. Strike their police, security, and intelligence members, as well as their treacherous agents. Destroy their beds, embitter their lives for them, and busy them with themselves. This is what the directive was in the last 3 months. Do we think this is some kind of a freak, not a freak coincidence? This actually is. This Ismail Abdullah Brinsley, who committed this execution-style murder of 2 heroic policemen in Brooklyn. How likely is it that this is what he was looking at to take his orders when he went and gunned down these innocent policemen in Brooklyn? Dr. Bostom, thank you so much. I'm Michele Bachmann. Thank you for joining on this afternoon. I know that you have something to say as well about the very specifics of Mayor de Blasio and his role in dismantling the surveillance system of the mosques in the New York City area. Can you tell the listeners this afternoon about that?
Yes, well, it's my understanding, again, no longer being a New York area resident, but it's my understanding that de Blasio campaigned on the idea that, Muslims were being targeted unfairly, and there, in fact, had been a very effective NYPD surveillance program, including mosque surveillance program, and he objected to this quite strongly and has scaled it back, if not eliminated it altogether. I know there was an AP story which uncovered the program and it led to all kinds of recriminations, but it seems to have been scaled back considerably. But I wanted to get back to the quote, Congresswoman Bachmann. This is Abu Muhammad al-Adnani. He's identified as an official spokesman and a senior leader of ISIS. And he's disseminating this view, which, again, it's uncomfortable for people, but these views that he's describing really come from classic Islamic law. This is the jurisprudence of jihad warfare doctrine, which says that any Muslim society that is not submitted to Islam, that is not paying tribute, that is not literally under Islamic law, its inhabitants are fair game, they're so-called harbis. They're in the lands of war, the Dar al-Harb, and they can be targeted indiscriminately. Now, you would think that this is ancient, irrelevant doctrine.
Okay, which again goes to the point that it didn't seem to make any sense. You have a guy walking on the sidewalk. He just walks up to this police car. 2 policemen are sitting inside. They're not doing anything, and all of a sudden, they get shot execution style. And so the thing is, this may be a crazy person who's doing this, but there's also on record an actual directive that is very familiar. We've seen this. This isn't the first directive that's come out from an Islamic leader, this being an Islamic State leader from the Middle East. This isn't the first directive. We've seen multiple directives that have come out to encourage, quote, the faithful, the Islamic faithful across the world, not just to be murdering other warriors in the Middle East, but actually to target civilians, and most specifically soldiers and police in the West.
Well, Anwar al-Awlaki comes to mind, Congresswoman. I mean, he
was an American, by the way, an American citizen, by the way.
Yes, I mean, so I think we have to stop the willful blindness. We have to deal with these uncomfortable realities, and that's why, again, I confess the only evidence that we have from Brinsley comes from his social media, but those give us certain leads in terms of the mosques that he identified, the Attaqua Mosque in Brooklyn, and then another one that he identified, which was associated with the Blind Sheikh in the first World Trade Center attack in 1993, and that's the infamous Al Farouk Mosque. Those connections, I pray that they are being examined by the NYPD. But
how likely do you think that is, Andrew? Andrew, how likely do you think that is?
The optimistic elements of my constituents say yes. I just don't know. But regardless, frankly, regardless of what the police is doing, this is why aren't the New York area newspapers with their huge budgets investigating these leads? These are very important leads.
I was in New York City around the time of the election and also around the time of the decision on Ferguson. And actually, right in the middle of the night, there was this huge noise that came. I got up out of my hotel room bed. I went to the window, and there was this crowd on the street below. And it was one of the many protests post-Ferguson that had happened. And I was listening to that protest. And we've heard repeated now that we've actually had in some of those protests where people call for killing cops in these protests. We need to hear more of people who are renouncing killing cops on these protests. In fact, Alan Dershowitz wrote, I think, a very important piece over the weekend about a female Brandeis student who said that she had no sympathy for the heroes who were recently assassinated. I mean, it's almost beyond belief what we're seeing, but talk a little bit more about Mayor de Blasio and his role in dismantling the system of surveillance of the mosques in New York City.
Well, again, this is a promise that he made. He was abetted by an Associated Press story which painted the investigation unit in the darkest colors as violating, civil rights, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe that these investigations have been dramatically scaled back. And this is
there's no question they have been. There is absolutely no question they have been. I mean, I can give another example of the Boston Marathon bomber, where I had specifically questioned the FBI as well about surveillance, and they told me flat out they aren't doing it anymore. I mean, the question is, are we going to be serious in this country about dealing with the global jihadist movement, or are we going to let them have their way? That's what's at risk. Dr. Andrew Bostom, you are amazing. I want to encourage people to go to your website. God bless. Hold on for the next.